Chapter 242. 3. Had he seen a ghost? Given such a short period of time, she was only able to shift the secret tunnel into her own dimensional space. But as that was a secret, she was not ready to reveal it. Hearing her explanation, Chi started to understand. Her eyes were filled with reverent worship as she then said, "The princess has really grown stronger. I just knew that you would be blessed and would come out safe. You've really mistaken me for someone else. I am not any kind of princess at all." Qingyu said a little helplessly, as she covered her palm over her face. She was not going to impersonate herself, to take on the identity of another person. Hearing that, Qingyu merely gave a soft sigh. "I do not know why the princess is not willing to acknowledge our relationship, but I will never forget the princess. Back then, among the many princesses, only you were like the god the most, and was most qualified to inherit the divine temple. A pity." Wait. Qingyu blinked her eyes, as she seemed to realize something. This woman has mistaken her for her mother. Calling her princess and talking about the god, who was once the lord of the divine temple. She would be really stupid if she still didn't realize it. So this woman is an old acquaintance of her mother's, and was very loyal to her as well. What a great reward this encounter had come to reap. From the look of things, the woman definitely knows quite a bit about the things that happened in the divine temple back then. It must be because she knows too much and posed to be a threat. That was why that woman laid a curse on her, and kept her imprisoned in this place. In that case, then it would not do any harm to acknowledge the relationship. Decided, Qingyu then smiled and said, "In your eyes, do I really look so much like the princess you are talking about?" Qingyu was taken aback by surprise. What does she mean? But she then went on to scrutinize the young lady, carefully studying her countenance and mannerisms. Something seems a little off. The young lady in front of her looks a little younger. Although the princess, who was already a few hundred years old, still looked like a budding young woman, compared to this young lady here. The princess had a tad bit more maturity in her. And that was a change that would only come after one had experienced quite a bit in their life. In that aspect, this young lady was a little bit different. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She has really been mistaken. With that thought in mind, Qiyu's face immediately fell sullen. "You, don't be so hasty. I haven't finished." Qingyu interjected, her eyes smiling as she said, "Aren't you curious why I look so much like that princess that you know? That is because she is my mother." Qiyu's sullen rage immediately turned into a stunned daze. "What did you just say?" She still could not believe her ears. Chapter 242. 4. Had he seen a ghost? Although it was rumored back then that the princess was indeed together with a man, and it had even spread to become such hot juicy gossip, she did not believe a word of it. And a young lady who looked so much like the princess had now come to tell her that she was the princess' daughter. Seeing the woman looking like she was shocked right to her soul, Qingyu sighed helplessly before her slim fingers snapped crisply. A ball of golden red flame immediately appeared at the tip of her finger, which illuminated the dim surroundings. "This should be enough to make you believe now, wouldn't it?" Qingyu asked. "It's the phoenix fire," Qingyu cried out in a slightly broken voice, her eyes immediately turning red. "This is the princess' divine fire. How could she possibly not recognize it? This young lady's really of the princess bloodline." To say how Qingyu came to know about this, the credit must go to Lu Junyao. Back when she was still in the Constellation continent, he had already given her quite a lot of information about advancing through her cultivation levels. When they first met, that guy had already shown a lot of interest in the strange and unique elixir fire she possessed. She had then looked further into it, and came to find out that her elixir fire was called the Phoenix Fire, and was not something that one would be able to gain by cultivating, but something that one was born with, a kind of power inherited through one's bloodline. That would also mean that either this body's father or mother had the power of Phoenix Fire in them. And after she saw the Phoenix divine beast in the cave within the Forbidden Ground, Lu Junyao had said that it was her mother's contracted divine beast. So the person who possessed the power of Phoenix Fire would most definitely be her mother. It must be said that her guesswork was spot on and right on the mark. Qiyyu greets the little princess. After ascertaining her identity, Qiyu immediately knelt with her body flat on the ground, paying Qingyu the most respectful homage a servant could show to her mistress. Qingyu quickly helped the woman up to her feet. Dispense with all these superficial formalities, and just call me Qingyu. My mother is no longer any kind of princess anymore, so you had better not address me with such a title. Hearing that, Qiyu furrowed her brows together. That wouldn't be appropriate. There's nothing inappropriate about that. Just do as I've said. Qingyu told her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I will. Rest assured that I will not let you just die like this. I will definitely think of a way to dispel the curse you've been afflicted with. Qingyu said in a serious tone as she held the woman's hands. Qiyu's eyes narrowed as she started to shake her head lightly. It's no use. I am a grand priestess myself, but I have absolutely no idea on how I can break this evil curse at all. Just trust me. I will definitely do it. Don't you want to be able to see my mother again, but allow yourself your life to end in regret like this? The young lady's voice was tender, and it was imbued with a strangely convincing power. Qiyu's heart winced with a vicious tug. Finally, she raised her eyes and said slowly, her voice pausing hesitatingly between each word. I want to live. Chapter 243. 1. Robbery. White Fen's lands. After the group of people from the Evil Purgers Coalition, led by Qing Yili, dealt with the Feng family, they finally left. And Qing Tianlin, who had been suppressing his rage and malevolence, all this time finally came to realize that he had forgotten something very important after being liberated from all that hassle. With a light flick of his sleeves, a ball of misty smoke appeared before him that came to show the figure of a man inside. That person was Shi Zhanchun, who was kneeling with one knee on the ground. He then said respectfully, I have not been able to get in touch with you over this period to report that I am unable to detect any sign of Qing Yu's aura anymore. She has disappeared without a trace for a very long time. What did you say? Rage was almost threatening to spill out from Qing Tianlin's eyes. What do you mean by disappearing without a trace? She could very possibly have been taken away by people from the upper realm. And her brother is not in the Faint Mist sect anymore as well. I sent people to go speak with people who were on rather good terms with Qing Yu, and according to what they said, Qing Yu had never stepped out from the Faint Mist sect, but has been missing for tens of days. My guess is that some highly skilled person must have taken her out of there, without anyone knowing. Shi Zhanchun explained. Hearing that, Qing Tianlin could not help but laughed out coldly. That's just preposterous. Even if Qing's cultivation has become a lot more inferior than before after being reborn, it couldn't possibly be that easy for anyone to take her away without anyone knowing. Moreover, she had those 2 secret treasures in her body, and just that weapon spirit Zongmai was a weapon that not anyone was able to stand against. With that thought in mind, Qing Tianlin then said in a deep low voice, Make your way up to the White Fen's lands this instant. I will get people to search around here, and if they come up with nothing. His voice paused for a moment, and his long narrow eyes gazed far away into the distance. Then I will go have a look up there in cloud heaven. In both his previous life and this one, what he lacked was just Qing. Maybe he had used the wrong method in the previous life that made Qing give such an extreme reaction. In this life, he was definitely not going to let her leave him so easily. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Once he has her, everything would be settled. The barbarian tribe was a reclusive race of people, and the location of their headquarters encampment was not known to anyone. The only known fact was that it sat within a vast and endless desert. Besides the usual large sandstorms that were usually seen, there was nothing special about the place. But once night fell, that was when the desert was most dangerous. Under the illumination of moonlight, those storms would turn into a massive and gigantic head of a beast, swallowing up intruders with nefarious intentions. Even in the day, not many people would come to this place, unless it was an elixir cultivator who had come here to search for rare herbs, the place seldom seeing anyone pass by at all. Chapter 243. 2. Robbery. The sun was hanging low over the western horizon, when a horse carriage suddenly appeared out of nowhere, slowly trundling over the sand. The wind gently lifted a corner of the carriage's curtain. A figure in red and a figure in black were seen leaning close against each other, their demeanor intimate. Those two people were Qing Lanfei and Mo Jingyu, who had just come out from the barbarian tribe's headquarters. Passing over this familiar piece of sandy land, Qing Lanfei could not help but curve up her lips, seeming rather emotional. Several months ago, I was still a highly fragmented soul. This was where I met Ayu, who brought me back to the barbarian tribe. Mo Jingyu sighed and embraced her tightly. I've made you suffer. It's all my fault. Qing Lanfei shook her head, and her limpid eyes looked straight at the man as she said, The fact that you have returned is the greatest blessing to me. Mo Jingyu was taken aback a moment, and it was not known what he had suddenly recalled, before he then laughed softly. What are you laughing about? Qing Lanfei raised an eyebrow as she asked, feeling a little puzzled. I am recalling how heartless you were towards me back then, and you would never have said such tender words to me at that time. When Mo Jingyu remembered that, his heart still felt a twinge of aggrievement. Upon hearing that, Qing Lanfei looked at him with an angry glint in her eyes. Isn't that because you were always so flippant, and was such a philanderer? Whoa, as she spoke, the horse carriage suddenly jolted violently and lurched forward. Qing Lanfei was caught off guard, and was going to fall out when Mo Jingyu's eyes turned sharp, moving quickly to hold her protectively in his arms, as he summoned up his spirit powers to steady the horse carriage. Hey, you've got quite a few moves, haven't you? Wonder if there is anything that's worth some money in the carriage. Sigh. I've been waiting here in these lifeless wilderness, and all I've got in return is finding my mouth filled with sand, nary seeing a single person pass by. Today must be a very unlucky day for you. Ignoring the voice coming in from outside, Mo Jingyu went to check on the person in his arms and asked her worriedly, Fei Air, did you knock yourself anywhere? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although he had reacted very quickly to catch her immediately, Fei Air's cultivation was no longer like it was before by a far way off. Having lost fragments of her soul would definitely make her weaker. Qing Lanfei shook her head and replied, I'm fine. You pulled me back very quickly just now, so how could I possibly be hurt anyway? Mo Jingyu was still a little worried, and he went on to check her himself. It was only after he saw that she was really unhurt that his heart was set at ease, which made Qing Lanfei not know whether to laugh or to cry. This fellow was always so overly concerned about her. Did you die in there? Aren't you going to hurry up and get that sorry behind of yours out here already? Seeing no movements coming from inside the horse carriage, after such a long while, a man with a beard who looked to be around 30 years of age stared with wide-eyed anger as he roared out in rage. Chapter 243. 3 Robbery? That rough grating voice caused Qing Lanfei to subconsciously knit her brows, her gaze peering through the gap in the curtains to look outside. Her voice was a little surprised as she asked, Have we encountered a bunch of robbers? They haven't been here in this world for a few hundred years, and has Cloud Heaven deteriorated to become so crass where lowlifes like robbers are running rampant? TSK. They are just courting their own death. Mo Jingyu scoffed coldly, as his long slender fingers parted the carriage's curtains, his pair of soul-stirring phoenix-like eyes gazing indifferently at the group of people standing in front, blocking their way. They had probably never seen a person with such a resplendently beautiful countenance, as the moment the carriage's curtains parted. All of them, including the bearded man who had raised his voice angrily earlier, were all stunned in their spots, unable to recover their senses for a good long while. They were bedazzled and mesmerized like a bunch of besotted young girls, as they stared at the beautiful-looking man. Qing Lanfei, who was blocked behind him, had naturally seen that hilarious scene, and her lips immediately clamped up stiffly together. It was probably because she found it too funny, when she suddenly burst out laughing with a loud puff. The slim figure moved herself, and came to be revealed as well. She was after all hailed as Cloud Heaven's greatest beauty back then, and her looks were naturally highly outstanding as well. Standing together with Mo Jingyu, a man of perfect and resplendent good looks, 2 words immediately came to mind: heavenly match. It was not known who was the one who gulped loudly, and then started to say mindlessly, "Beautiful, just too beautiful looking. I have never seen anyone with such unbelievably good looks." After the bedazzlement started to fade away, a number of them began to come back to their senses. One of them smacked a person who was drooling stupidly on the back of his head, and said angrily through tightly clenched teeth, "So what if they're good looking? Can good looks fill your belly? Don't forget that we are here to rob them." Upon saying that, a large shiny saber immediately flashed in his hand. A long metal chain was wrapped around its hilt, extending around the man's arm, his body exuding a menacing air. Only people who have truly seen blood spilled would give out such an aura, and it could be seen that he had committed a fair share of cruel and ruthless misdeeds. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You leave the horse carriage behind if you know what's good for you, and I can spare you your lives. Mo Jingyu thought that he was hearing things. To think that the day would come that he would experience being robbed. And what was it with this tone that sounded like he was being shown mercy? Is he then expected to gratefully go thank them and kowtow to them for it? With the kind of character he had, how could he possibly endure that? But right at that moment, a warm, gentle hand held him back lightly. Mo Jingyu turned back to gaze puzzledly at her, but saw Qing Lanfei smile gently at him. It's never easy wandering outside like this. Since they want the carriage, just give it to them. I was thinking of getting off to have a walk around anyway, so that we can see the scenery along the way. Chapter 243. For robbery? What is happening here? When did Fei Air become so kind and passive? No, not to say that she isn't kind-hearted, but his impression of Fei Air was one who was never fearful of such things, and would never allow herself to be bullied like this. But today, just as Mo Jingyu was feeling all confused and befuddled, he saw that she had slowly come to climb down from the horse carriage, and had extended a hand before him with an eyebrow raised. "Aren't you coming?" Although Mo Jingyu did not understand it fully, but based on his trust in her, he held her hand as he stepped off the horse carriage. At least you know what's good for you," the man holding the large saber in his hand said with ridicule, like he despised the cowardly ways of the two people, in order to preserve their own lives. Mo Jingyu's footsteps halted for a moment, almost unable to hold himself back from making his move, but then gave up on it when he saw Qing Lanfei stop him. A few of the robbers were curious about the kind of things they had in the horse carriage, and they went on ahead to part the carriage's curtains first. They had just managed to clamber their way inside when frightful howls and wails were immediately heard. Mo Jingyu had been dragged a distance away from there, and when he heard that clamor, he could not help but cast a surprised glance towards the woman beside him. "What is happening?" When the man holding the large saber saw what was happening, he went walking swiftly over to the horse carriage and shouted at the men inside. "What are all of you screaming your head off for?" It was only when he came close that he was able to see that the faces of the men were filled with many unidentifiable bugs crawling all over, scurrying around in all directions. When the man came stomping over, the bugs all flew away in an instant. But for the men who had the bugs all over their faces just now, red swollen lumps could be seen all over. It was probably because it was really itchy that made one of them lift his hand up to scratch his face. In the end, from within the tiny red swollen lumps, he dug out what looked like tiny insect larvae, which was an utterly disgusting sight. "What did the two of you do?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The two people had not walked that far a distance when they were called to a halt. Qing Lanfei's face was innocent as she responded. "What? You still going to feign ignorance? Don't you see what their faces have turned into here? Did you set poison inside the carriage to draw those nefarious insects in to attack us?" The bearded man from before asked with a ferociously aggressive face, his eyes wide as symbols like he was going to eat the two of them up. "If I had set poison in there, wouldn't I have just poisoned them to death straight away? Why would I want to disfigure just their faces? Could you possibly think that I am jealous of all your good looks?" Qing Lanfei went on to say slowly at an unhurried pace, before sniffing scornfully in disdain, her face highly indignant. Mo Jingyu stifled a laugh. He had really not seen this mischievous and adorable look on his Fei Air for such a long time. She was just so black-bellied when she pranks people, and the words she said to the bunch of robbers would surely cause them to die from infuriation. Chapter 244. 1. Stop the killing by killing as expected. The moment the bunch of robbers heard those words filled with hidden ridicule, their faces immediately turned an ashen green. She had clearly employed some unknown method to attract all those bugs, and she was even pushing the blame back onto themselves. "You nefarious bitch. I will kill you." The bearded man, who had formed a favorable impression towards the couple before, because of their flawless good looks, immediately became enraged, and an iron mace filled with vicious hooked spikes appeared in his hand. He charged forward straightaway, right at the woman, who maintained an absolutely harmless smile upon her face, with a brutal strike. But before he could even get close, his entire body was suddenly sent flying back, like he had been struck by a powerfully heavy punch, blood spewing out from his mouth as he soared through the air. Qing Lanfei turned to look speechlessly at a certain man, the displeasure in her eyes undisguisable. Mo Jingyu looked at her like what he did was only natural. "I will not allow you to get hurt. It's just a few insignificant lowlifes, and I have not been weakened to such a pathetic state." Qing Lanfei could not help but roll her eyes at him. She was merely suffering from a deficient soul, and had not lost her powers completely. Does he need to get himself so worried? You've said it yourself that they are just a bunch of insignificant lowlifes. If you need to raise your hand against such worthless characters, wouldn't that make your man look like an inconsequential piece of decoration? It must be said that Mo Jingyu had a rather slick tongue, able to show consideration for his wife's feelings, and innocuously display affection for her at the same time. Seeing Qing Lanfei look at him with a pout, and her beautiful face then breaking into a bashful smile, he knew that he had succeeded in achieving his goal. But his words had, however, infuriated the bunch of ruthless robbers. To be able to roam within this desolate desert, just having guts alone would not be enough, but calls for one to possess a certain amount of powers. Otherwise, before their prey can even appear, they would have been buried under the swirling sands. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. So the bunch of robbers were not just a bunch of average nobodies. Having suffered such humiliation and burning from their scathing taunts, a murderous aura slowly exuded from their bodies, and the spirit power aura that was revealed seemed to feel rather familiar. "They are from the Hunters Guild?" An eyebrow on Mo Jingyu's face raised up, looking a little surprised. Several hundred years ago, there were only 4 major powers in Cloud Heaven. The Hunters Guild only came to rise in power later. It was originally thought that they were just a tiny inconsequential power that would not last, but for some unknown reason, they grew in might very quickly later, forcibly squeezing themselves up into becoming the 5th major power in Cloud Heaven. Their members were called hunters by people outside who specialized in taking on prickly and difficult missions, a myriad mix in a bubbling pot, where all sorts of people could be found. Although their members were numerous, it was also highly chaotic inside. Chapter 244. 2. Stop the killing by killing. Although the Hunters Guild was able to hold a position of power in Cloud Heaven, if one were to be very strict about it, they could not compare to the other 4 major powers. So what everyone saw on the surface was just one side. The reality hidden beneath was they were not truly acknowledged by the others. Not to mention Mo Jingyu, who was such a haughty and proud man. He couldn't even be bothered with a faction of power that was not even worth his notice. Back in those earlier years, even when the Hunters Guild had not been all that much to look at, such a thing would never have happened, where the guild members could blatantly come out to commit robbery like this. So how much lower had they fallen to now? Mo Jingyu could not help but curled his lips up into a contemptuous smile. "Knowing that we are people from the Hunters Guild, and you still dare to offend us so outrageously, it seems to me that you are not aware of our guild's rules." The man carrying the large saber with a long chain wrapped around his arm, then flashed a bloodthirsty smile on his face. The Hunters Guild's rules? It was probably known to everyone who was not a recluse and isolated themselves from the world. The Hunters Guild was famous for having the greatest number of members among the various powers in Cloud Heaven, and they were also in existence, well known to avenge the slightest snub, biting back like a venomous snake. Anyone who came to provoke a person from the Hunters Guild would suffer maniacal and incessant revenge. But that was not because the Hunters Guild was being loyal or protective of their people, but it was to satisfy their own arrogance and to stroke their inflated egos, not allowing outsiders to show the guild any slight. Have the man dealt with on the spot, but leave the woman alive. Our brothers here have not broken fast for quite a long while already, the man said as he slowly undid the chain around his arm and pulled his hand back to stretch his wrist. The sound of his bones crackling rang out clearly as he gazed menacingly at the two people a short distance away. It looks like he is the leader among the bunch of robbers. But what did he just say? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Emo Jingyu's face that had been smiling all this while suddenly turned to show a completely indiscernible expression on his face, as the aura around his body silently changed without anyone knowing. He was used to be recklessly willful and already did not have a good reputation, so he did not care how people looked at him. But when someone was speaking ill of people he cared about, or about the person that held a position in his heart, he was definitely not going to allow that to pass. Fei Air, stand to the side a moment. Let me put an end to all these scum. Emo Jingyu's voice was still as gentle as before, but the aura that was flaring out from his body, that sent chills running through a person, was impossible to miss. Qing Lanfei sighed out a breath. Qing Yu, do not try to dissuade me. I know that you have a kind heart, but the entire bunch of them will just be a plague letting them live, and they will have to die sooner or later. Emo Jingyu said bitingly. Chapter 244. 3. Stop the killing by killing. Qing Lanfei shook her head as she smiled. I am not trying to dissuade you, but just want to say that I can stay by your side. But her offer was rejected by Emo Jingyu, who thoughtfully said her body was still a little weak, and it was not suitable for her to be fighting and killing yet. But how could she not know that a certain man had actually just come awake from a long deep slumber, and must be feeling rather stiff all over? He was just making up an excuse, seeking to stretch his muscles and tendons a bit with this bunch of robbers, who delivered themselves right up to their door. But Qing Lanfei was not going to expose him, silently retreating away to the side. Emo Jingyu then threw up a barrier around her, so that those scum would not be able to even get close to her. The group of more than 10 men immediately moved to surround him, not thinking for a moment how shameless ganging up on a lone person really was. And from they could see, this incredibly handsome-looking man looked just like someone who would hide behind a woman's skirt, and must be a frail weakling through and through, who would be smashed to death with just one single punch from each of them when they became serious. Emo Jingyu's eyes were filled with cold contempt and quiet murder. When that man had spouted those offensive words just now, he had already decided to slaughter every single one of them. What they were doing now turned out to be what he would have wanted, so that he did not have to take them down one by one. It is always said that man proposes, but heaven disposes. Emo Jingyu did not even have the time to make a move, yet then the whole group of people suddenly froze still in their spots, barely just a meter's distance away from him. Time seemed to stop for a few seconds. Over that vast and barren desert sands, frightfully tragic screams then tore through the silent air. One by one, the men were then violently torn apart by a powerful force while alive, splatterings of blood and flesh flying through the air, as the ground became littered with broken limbs and body parts. Blood flowed like a river, a gory sight that was really too grisly to look at. Emo Jingyu's face immediately turned dark. Right at that moment, a lazy-sounding voice rang out, melodious and innocent. Ay, look at these people. Wonder how many lifetimes' blessings did they take to accumulate to be able to die in such a glorious manner. When they arrive down there, they will surely be regarded with great honor. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Xiu. Ran. Those words spat out through Emo Jingyu's tightly gritted teeth. Sigh. We have not met for so many years, and our Jingyu is still as unadorable as before. How many times have I told you? Call me Ran if we're brothers, but you're always being so distant, calling me by my full name. Accompanying that grumbling male voice that rang out, a tall slim figure in royal blue then slowly came to appear before their eyes. The weather in early spring was still carrying a tinge of a chill in the air, but the man still carried a silver folding fan in his hand, lazily fanning himself in a languid and suave manner. The man's looks were not inferior in the slightest when compared to Mo Jingyu's, but with a tinge of languid laziness and a devil-may-care look in his eyes. His long back-swept eyes were curved up into smiling arcs, his demeanor unfathomable, looking very much like a treacherous smiling tiger. Chapter 244. For stop the killing by killing. Hey, isn't this our little Lan Fei? To think that you're still together with Jingyu. Xiao Yiran said as his gaze turned to look at Qing Lan Fei standing at the side, his eyes immediately lighting up, like he had just seen something rare and precious. The moment those words were heard, Qing Lan Fei creased up her brows, before saying in a displeased tone, "May I trouble you to do away with the word little?" "Huh? What could be the problem? I am like 300 years older than you. Is there anything wrong with me calling you little?" Xiao Yiran said as he fanned himself lazily, the expression on his face seemingly surprised. Immediately after that, it looked as if he suddenly recalled something, and with a look of realization on his face he said, "I have completely forgotten. Jingyu would more or less be at least 200 years older than you too. It seems like you've grown so used to being by his side, that you do not feel that I am actually much older." Mo Jingyu clenched his jaws. Is this fella saying that he is getting old in a roundabout way? What have you come here for? Xiao Yiran laughed softly and replied, "I am naturally here to welcome you back. You have really chosen quite a good time to awaken, on the very year that the mind-free peak is prophesied to manifest. I had thought that you would wait for a few more 100 years. Mo Jingyu's expression grew dark, like a sudden thought just came across his mind. He then swept his gaze over the ground, that was littered with severed limbs and other body parts before he said, "Why did you need to kill these people from the Hunters Guild? Don't tell me you had no intention of killing them just now." Xiao Yiran arched up an eyebrow to say, an unreadable smile on his lips, "Still, you did not need to do it in such a brutal manner." Mo Jingyu could never get used to the man's merciless and ruthless killing methods, which sometimes made him look like a terrifying maniac, always professing to be seeking perfection, but just made it a nauseating sight for others to see. Brutal? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You hearing that? Xiao Yiran did not show any displeasure on his face, but instead looked smilingly at Mo Jingyu to say, "Jingyu, have you slept for far too long a time? Have you forgotten that not only are you the chieftain of the barbarians, you also hold the revered position as one of the 3 kings of hell? Since these people dare to come provoke you like this, you should then teach them a good vicious lesson to make them remember it. But I know you too well. Though you put on a menacing face, you hide a kind heart, unable to really strike people down completely, so I had to do it for you." Xiao Yiran's eyes were 2 arcing crescents, his mouth curved up in a harmless and disarming smile. He was such a handsome and good-looking man, seemingly highly approachable and easygoing. Who could have known that he would turn out to be such a mighty entity outside of Cloud Heaven's 5 major powers, as one of the 3 kings of hell from the powerful Hell King's palace? People called him the ferocious demon Azura, his hands tainted by the blood of countless lives taken, one who killed without blinking. Everywhere he went, dead bodies lay, and frightful wails rang incessantly. A man born to bring massacre, and lived for the slaughter. Chapter 245. 1. Teasing ridicule. Mo Jingyu had been fortunate enough countless times to remain the leader of the Hell King's palace. Otherwise, if he were to be ruled by this fella, who knew nothing but slaughter, the entire Cloud Heaven might have descended into unimaginable chaos. Seeing that the man was remaining silent, and not going to say a word, Xiao Yiran curved up his lips into a smile and said, "Since you've come back, you should go to the Hell King's palace to have a look. Big Brother had instructed that I must definitely bring you back, as he can only set his heart at ease after he sees you with his own eyes." At the mention of Big Brother, the expression on Mo Jingyu's face was a little taken aback. "How is Big Brother doing?" "You'll know when you go back and see for yourself." Xiao Yiran did not reveal much, but just slapped his folding fan on his palm suddenly. A group of people came sailing through the air from a distance away, carrying a wide and luxurious palanquin. before stopping right overhead in midair. Throughout the entire cloud heaven, probably only the Hell King's palace could pull off such a lavish and prolific display. The palanquins carried by 12 extremely highly skilled pugilists whenever they set out on a journey, moving at speeds that was much faster than most spirit beasts, so resplendent that it made people turn green with envy. Mo Jingyu's gaze darkened slightly as he turned to meet Qing Lanfei's eyes without a word. It seemed like he would have to take it up. On the other side of cloud heaven, it was another moonless and windy night. Because Qingyu lost her way earlier that day, it was a long time before she was able to find her way back following the directions Qiyu gave. Yufan had thought that the young lady was really so bold, and had run away, which caused the servant maids who were living near to Qingyu to be punished for it. When Qingyu came back, she had yet to even reach close to the place she lived at when she saw a row of people kneeling outside, the bodies stiffly upright, their heads hung low. Qingyu blinked her eyes, the expression on her face a little confused. What is happening here? You're not even able to keep watch over one single young lady? Since you're all so useless, then all of you should just die. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU as the highly incensed voice of the man rang out. Several figures were struck and sent flying, blood spurting incessantly out in agony. When they saw the young lady standing a short distance away from them, their eyes flared wide open, like they had just seen a ghost. Didn't this girl run away? Why has she suddenly appeared again? Had they all suffered that beating for nothing? Qingyu pretended not to see all the strange looks they were all giving her, as she walked leisurely inside. Her tone was lazily idle as she asked, "What are all of you doing here?" "I had just gone out for a stroll, and Lord Yufan has gathered so many people here. Is it because the servant maid warming your bed last night did not do her utmost to fulfill your desires, and you're venting it out here at my place?" Yufan was in a state of shock at that moment when he saw her. Besides being shocked, he seemed to feel an emotion that he himself did not really understand at the same time. Chapter 245. 2. Teasing ridicule upon hearing what the young lady said. It immediately caused his mood that had just improved slightly to turn into a tumultuous storm, seemingly about to erupt. It was deadly silent. The divine temple might have been spotless and untainted 1,000 years ago, a pure and holy place that was highly revered. But over the years after their godly lord died, those fellas who were always up to no good in there had grown to become more arrogant, turning the place into becoming affiliated with all kinds of dark and dirty deeds. But Yufan was however a rare exception. He was highly valued by Qing Luoyan because he had a pure and simple mind, never getting himself involved with the evil misdeeds of all those fellas. Cardinal vices like wine, women, avarice and pride were banal desires to him and did not interest him. He only knew loyalty to the divine temple and never asked for anything else. Although he was always fully clad in dark robes and carried around a stern and forbidding expression on his face, he was actually quite handsome looking, which won the favor of quite a good number of women. A pity he was just an insensitive piece of wood when it came to such things, keeping women away at arm's length. And now, what did this young lady here just say to him? The servant maid who warmed his bed last night. Has Lord Yufan broken his practice of abstinence? No one even came to suspect the veracity of Qingyu's words, as that was not something anyone would dare to joke about. So they quickly assumed that to be the truth. But Qingyu had clearly made a joke out of it. And not only had she done just that, the joke succeeded very well, immediately believed as fact readily. It was so successful that it drove a certain man's rage to shoot up to its peak. When did I ever need a servant maid to warm my bed? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Those words sounded as if they were squeezed out through the gaps between tightly gritted teeth. Yufan's hands were tightly clenched up into fists, his knuckles crackling crisply, looking like he really wanted nothing more than to strangle the damned woman right in front of him to death. You must know that one will need to pay the price for carelessly spouting such pure and utter garbage. It was just a joke, you know. It is such a waste of Lord Yufan's good-looking face, seeing you look so stern all the time. Qingyu said with a shrug of her shoulders, looking rather helpless. She then gave a big lazy yawn, seeming like she was feeling really sleepy, as she took a step forward to go past the guy so that she can get some beauty sleep. But she had just barely taken 2 steps when Yufan grabbed her by the arm and gave it a vicious twist. "Where did you go? Didn't I tell you that the Divine Temple has its rules, and there are many places where entry is prohibited?" Qingyu's brows knitted up, the amount of force he grabbed her with causing her to feel a bit of pain. She skillfully broke free from his grasp, and then discreetly backed away from him a little, before she said in an emotionless tone, "I merely accidentally got myself lost for a while, and I could not even find a single person to ask in this godforsaken place of yours, after walking blindly around for so long. It really wasn't easy for me to finally find my way back here, you know?" Chapter 245. 3. Teasing ridicule. Is that really the truth? Yufan's brows furrowed together as he looked at her with suspicion in his eyes. Qingyu arched up an eyebrow as she glanced at the man. "If I was really trying to run away, do you think that you will be able to stare at me like this now?" Yufan was stumped by her words, and his lips turned stiff as he clamped his mouth shut, deciding not to probe any further. Looking at all the people still kneeling around him, an impatient glint flashed across his eyes, and he then waved his hand dismissively at them. "All of you are dismissed." Everyone was surprised to hear that. Have they all just escaped from the jaws of death? Everyone suddenly came back to their senses and glanced gratefully at Qingyu, before they quickly scrambled away from there. Yufan did not leave, his gaze fixed upon the young lady as she slowly made her way inside, like she did not see him at all, dawdling as she climbed up onto the bed of clouds. "What are you doing?" Yufan asked in a cold, unfeeling voice. "It's already so late into the night. What else will I be doing if not to sleep?" Qingyu rolled her eyes in speechlessness. Seeing that the man was still standing stock still in his spot without moving an inch, her eyes glinted mischievously for a moment, and she rested her chin lazily in her palm, to look at him with a faint smile on her lips, her head slightly tilted to one side. "To have Lord Yufan suddenly being so concerned about me, and not choosing to go rest even though it's so late, together with the fact that you mobilized so many people to search for me earlier, could you really have feelings for me?" With her already seductively beautiful countenance, and with that face intentionally teasingly sultry at that moment, any man would probably not be able to stop themselves from being seduced by her. Yufan had been here in the Divine Temple for several hundred years, and it was not as if he had never met women before. But he had really never met a woman who was as bold and acted as maddeningly frivolous as Qingyu, who could not only completely disregard his stern and stoically stone-cold face, but even have the audacity to make fun of him. Seeing the man's face turn a rather dark and ugly shade, Qingyu then feigned a surprised look by blinking her eyes. "Oops, did I really get it right? Are you really?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It was probably because she had teased him too much already, when the ever-expressionless and stone-faced Yufan was seen to ramble on in a tirade for the very first time. "You are a woman that cannot be any more shameless. You think with your looks." He was just about to ridicule Qingyu by saying that she was not good-looking enough, and was not qualified to make him want to look at her. But when he was faced with the young lady's exquisite and absolutely flawless face, he suddenly found himself at a loss for words. And Qingyu just had to stare straight into his eyes teasingly. What were you going to say about me?" Yufan seemed to be gritting his teeth in silence, but he did not say anything more. It was only when he turned himself around to leave that he said in an emotionless voice, "You have better not get any more funny ideas in your head. If you do not want those people to die because of you, you'd better learn to know your place. The temple lord has given instructions for you to go serve at the priest's hall." Upon saying that, he left without turning his head back. Chapter 245. 4. Teasing ridicule. Qingyu's eyes narrowed as she rubbed her finger over her chin. Priest's hall? She wouldn't run into that man from yesterday, would she? That man seemed to have sensed her aura back then. If she was sent to a place where she would be so near to him, she would be discovered sooner or later. Thinking of that, Qingyu turned, and was just about to open her mouth to say something when a shimmering contortion in the air caught her attention. A tall, well-built figure then came walking out from there. Who else could that be but Lu Junyao, who came sneaking into the young lady's sleeping quarters every night? The moment the man appeared, he walked over to the bed of soft clouds straightaway and encircled his arms around the young lady leaning back comfortably. His voice was magnetically low as he asked, "Where did you go?" Qingyu raised an eyebrow to look at him. "How did you know that I went out today? Did he come here earlier?" Lu Junyao laughed softly, and his long slender finger reached out slowly past her cheek. As she stared at him in surprise, he gently rubbed at the skin on a spot covered by her long black hair. When he retracted his hand, Qingyu's sharp eyes saw that the man's fair-skinned finger was stained with something dark and black that was left on his finger when his finger rubbed the skin behind her cheek. Qingyu's eyes widened. That is, could she rubbed against something in that broken and dilapidated palace, and it stuck on her skin? Once this material is rubbed onto one's skin, it is very difficult to wash off, and it also carries a special scent. Lu Junyao said, as he brought his stained fingertip close to Qingyu's nose, and he waved his finger lightly. She could smell a mild woody scent, although it was very faint, but elixir cultivators were born with an exceptional sense of smell, where the slightest scent would not be able to escape their noses. Thinking about that, a chill ran through Qingyu. Fortunately for her, that fella Yu Fan was not an elixir cultivator. Otherwise, she would have been immediately exposed. As Qingyu was unable to see her own face, she raised her head up to look at Lu Junyao and asked, "Do I have a lot of it on my face?" "Just a bit," Lu Junyao replied. He cast a tiny minor clear water spell, and the bit of stain on the side of the young lady's face immediately disappeared completely, without a single trace of it left. "It's done," Lu Junyao said as he embraced the soft figure in his arms, his hand toying with the young lady's raven locks. "Can you tell me now where you went off to today?" I discovered a very important person today, a woman who was once my mother's serving attendant." As Qingyu spoke, her eyes turned to look at a particular spot. She then called out in a gentle voice, "Qingyu, you can come out now. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." Because she was worried that it would be very dangerous for the woman to remain there by herself, Qingyu decided to bring the woman back here with her. As she was already a frail and weakened translucent spirit soul, it was very easy for Qingyu to conceal her. Upon hearing Qingyu's call, Qiyu's figure slowly materialized. At the moment the woman saw Lu Junyao, her entire body stiffened, and immense shock came to show on her face. That pair of familiar-looking violet eyes were possessed by only one person throughout the entire cloud heaven. It was that young child who was frequently seen together with the princess, and his real identity was Greeting to the Dark Overlord. Chapter 246. 1. Endearing pet named Qiyu's actions came so suddenly, which caused the two other people to be surprised for a moment. Lu Junyao looked at the woman out of the corner of his eyes with an almost unnoticeable smile on his face, his voice calm. "You know who I am?" His voice was tinged with the same familiar danger. Qingyu tugged at the man's sleeve and whispered, "No need to be so tense. She's on our side." Lu Junyao lowered his head to look at Qingyu, his eyes filled with distrust towards that woman. Upon seeing that, Qingyu curved her lips up into a smile and said, "The Dark Lord must not remember me anymore, as you were just a young youth back then. But that pair of violet irises you possess would be impossible for anyone to forget." "Just who are you really?" Lu Junyao's brows creased together. Hearing the woman's words, it seemed like she really knew him from before. Qingyu gave a soft laugh, the sound carrying a self-mocking tinge. "Right, in today's Bright Moon Temple. Everyone probably only remembers the one person who stands above all but one, the Grand Priest Songjian. Who among the people now knows that back when our god was still here with us, the man Songjian was just a nobody that no one had ever heard of before. And she had been one of the 10 grand priests with an unlimited future ahead of her, but had now had all her cultivation destroyed, so weak and vulnerable, a useless good for nothing where even strong sunlight could destroy her. It was as if memories of the past had flooded her heart in an overwhelming surge, which made Qingyu suddenly feel so incredibly tired. She bent her back and bowed slowly before the two people, before she made herself fade away, disappearing from sight. Her name is Qiyu. She was once my mother's most trusted attendants. Qiyu went on to explain. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She had naturally believed Qiyu's words. It was probably because she had seen so much of people throughout her two different lives that enabled her to be able to better discern between hypocrisy and sincerity coming from a person. From the moment when the woman had first appeared outside that worn and broken palace, Qingyu had seen the woman's eyes that were dead as burnt ashes come to shine with a glimmer of hope, a kind of joy and thankfulness that could only possibly come from deep inside one's heart. After hearing Qingyu explain, Lu Junyao then slowly began to relax his guard a little. His eyes narrowed as he swung his gaze over to the spot where the woman had disappeared from, looking like he suddenly realized something. The expression on his face was a little surprised as he asked, "Her flesh body has already died?" Actually, from the moment that the woman appeared, he should have noticed that something was not right. But his wariness had diverted his attention away from it, and it was only now that he realized. Hearing that, Qingyu quickly went on to say, "I had wanted to ask you about this earlier. In situations where one has whittled away under the power of a curse, is there any chance of recovery at all?" Chapter 246. 2. Endearing Pet Name Curse. Lu Junyao snorted disdainfully. That's really something only these people from the Divine Temple are capable of. We have a soul restorer back in the Darklands who is able to repair cultivators whose souls come to suffer severe damage or is broken. But for someone in her situation. Lu Junyao paused a moment before he continued. The power from a curse is unlike other regular forms of power. As that kind of power is too evil and unorthodox, I cannot be certain. Qingyu's eyes lit up. That means there's a possibility to restore it. That's great. Then I'll just leave the task in your hands. The young lady looked at him with bright sparkly eyes, looking so much like a child who was just given candy, and was absolutely delighted. Lu Junyao could not help but laugh as his long slender fingers stroked her hair. His voice low and tender as he said, "Do you need to be so courteous with me? As long as it is something within my power, I will do everything I can to help you." Qingyu's eyes curved into crescents as she raised her head, meeting the man's tender and indulgent violet gaze. His eyes so deep that they looked like deep bottomless violet pools. Although those eyes looked so mysterious and dangerous, she knew in her heart that sincerity and earnestness were in them. And there was no deceit. "What is it?" Seeing that her eyes look a little strange, Lu Junyao immediately opened his mouth to ask, "Why are you looking at me like this?" Qingyu shook her head as she laughed, and words that she had never spoken of before came out in a surge of emotion. "I just thought that I liked seeing you how earnest you looked when you told me you'll do everything in your power to help me." It was not known from when it actually started, where such a highly revered and haughty fella would subject himself to her every whim, when she could have dealt with the issues on her own. Despite how winding the process became, even when he would get injured and bleed, or come to feel pain. But he seemed determined to isolate her from all external dangers, to the extent that if she was willing, he would shelter her from all harm like a prized canary. If this had been her in her past life, to have someone care about her so sincerely, even if it was just by one tiny bit, she probably would not have turned to become so utterly jaded. That's so foolish. Like he had seen some other emotion within the young lady's brightly smiling eyes. Lu Junyao clasped the young lady close to his chest, embracing her so tightly that Qingyu felt a twinge of pain. Although it was uncomfortable for Qingyu, she did not resist his actions. In the next second, she heard the man's deep voice sound out above her head. "Can you feel it?" "What?" Qingyu asked, a little puzzled. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. That you're here in my arms. Lu Junyao's voice sounded a little hoarse, his hand gently stroking the young lady's back, seeming like he was comforting the young lady tenderly. Qingyu was silent for a moment. She had suddenly thought about her previous life, and was unable to differentiate whether she was now living in an imaginary life, or was this all real. That's right. She is no longer the person she was in her previous life. And she is now no longer alone. Chapter 246. 3. Endearing pet named Qingyu closed her eyes tightly and suddenly stretched her hand out to circle around the man's waist, his voice exceptionally tender as she called out, "Lu Junyao?" The man responded, and then waited quietly for her to continue, even though she did not say anything for a long while. Having known her for so long, he had seldom seen the little one look so sorrowful. He tried his hardest to be carefully gentle, to comfort the little figure, who was looking exceptionally fragile at that moment. She did not say a single word as she hugged him rather needily, and he thought that she had drifted off to sleep over time. He had moved his body slightly just now, and he heard her murmur softly, an almost inaudible sound. "What did you say?" Her voice had been too soft, and he could not quite catch what she said. The fingers of the young lady's hand placed around his waist then slowly twisted, and his clothes that rubbed against his skin felt a little ticklish. "Yao!" She finally called out in a soft voice. Lu Junyao was suddenly taken aback in shock, and it was a long while before he was able to come back to his senses. "Did you just call me?" "Yao." Qingyu lifted her head that was nestled against his chest up slowly, and in those mesmerizingly alluring eyes that were usually filled with feigned smiles, he could see the undisguised delight and joy in them. "I like hearing you call me that. It sounds intimate and I like it very much." For such a picky and fussy man to say he likes it twice in quick succession like that, it could be seen from there how much he really liked it. Qingyu could not help but smile back at him. But after hearing what the man came to say in the next instant, she could not help but laugh out loud, highly amused. "Only the heavens know how jealous I was when I hear you calling that fella little ye time after time." The man's tone was stern and severe, and listening to it closely, one would be able to hear that his voice had a little bit of bitter aggrievement. Qingyu could not help laughing out loud. "It's just a form of address. Do you need to nitpick on such a trivial thing?" "Of course I need to. And I need to very, very much." Lu Junyao nodded with a serious expression on his face. Hearing these two forms of address right now clearly shows which one is on closer terms with you. And however you hear it, Yao sounds so much more intimate and endearing than little Yi. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You're easily satisfied, aren't you?" Qingyu said teasingly, as she stretched her hand out to pinch the man's handsome face. Lu Junyao smiled and caught the small hand wreaking havoc on his face, tightly grasped in his palm as he then said, "I came here this time because I have something else I wanted to tell you. I got Bai Ji Yen to go down to the Constellation Lands to bring little Bei up here." Qingyu's eyes widened as she stared. "When did you bring little Bei here?" Chapter 246. 4. Endearing pet name 5 days ago, Lu Junyao replied. "Why are you only telling it to me now?" Qingyu said as she glared at him with a rather displeased look. "This fella has been coming here every day, and he only came to tell her after such a long time." Lu Junyao smiled, and then said to her, "I had originally not wanted to tell you about it at all, but as there was a change in plans, I decided to tell you earlier." "What kind of a plan was it?" "I had originally intended to send little Bei to where his father is, but that man suddenly brought forward his departure from the barbarian tribe. So I am thinking that little Bei can take it as a form of rigorous training, by letting him go meet the man on his own." Lu Junyao said very simply. Qingyu listened to the man quietly till he finished, and she then looked at the man with a suspicious gaze. "What kind of a trick do you have up your sleeve?" "Huh. I feel that you do not seem to have a good impression of my father, to the extent that it might even be considered to be bordering on dislike. But here you are, being so nice as to send little Bei to go be reunited with him." Qingyu slowly relayed her doubts to him. Hearing that, Lu Junyao arched up an eyebrow, seemingly never expecting that his dislike towards another person had been so readily obvious. "It is true that I do not like him, as he was unable to protect Aunt Lon good and proper. And he even caused you and little Bei to end up being left in the lower realms, to suffer for so many years. Just by that alone, it is reason enough to make me despise him." When he spoke about that, Lu Junyao's tone of voice was full of contempt. But he also looked like he was feeling highly helpless, as he lowered his head to look at Qingyu to say, "But who asked me to be so much in love with his daughter? So even if he is rather lacking as a father, I have no choice but to show him a little friendliness, to avoid having him come try to drive a wedge between us if he doesn't like me. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Hearing him say those words, Qingyu really did not know what to say in response to that, feeling like she wanted to laugh at him, but also finding the guy just too damningly adorable at the same time. Before Lu Junyao was even able to react, Qingyu suddenly pulled his neck down, and she planted one big fat kiss right upon the man's exquisitely refined and handsome-looking face, before she then winked at him craftily. You do not have to worry. My father will definitely like you. But that very man Lu Junyao was speaking of was at that very moment in the place where Cloud Heaven's mightiest power, besides the mysterious mind-free peak, was the Hell King's palace. Mo Jingyu had not come back to this place for the past several hundred years, but everything was still exactly the same as before, where nothing looked like it had changed. Upon seeing him appear in that place, the people there did not show any surprised expression, making it look as if he had never left before. People in the Hell King's palace were mostly cold-hearted and distant, fellas without any feelings or desire, the iciest place throughout the entire Cloud Heaven. Chapter 247. 1. I believe that you will definitely protect me, not just the people in there, but also the climate. Throughout the 4 seasons in a year, snow-white covered, the air bitter cold, and the ground frozen with ice. The people in there were all cultivators, people who possessed high resistance, and were strong against the chill regardless, whether in terms of their body constitution or cultivation. And as they stayed in those lands all year round, they were naturally not that much affected by the bitter chill. But for most regular people, they would definitely not be able to withstand the severe and wintry cold of the place. Like Qing Lanfei, whose cultivation, at that moment, was no longer as powerful as before. Although she was able to grit her teeth and endure the bitter cold air, her thin body still subconsciously trembled and shook. Fortunately, Mo Jingyu had already guessed that her thin and weakened body would not be able to withstand it, and he had made ample preparations in anticipation for such a situation. Qing Lanfei had just started to feel a little cold when she suddenly felt a weight on her shoulders, and she felt herself enveloped in warmth. She raised her eyes up to look, and saw Mo Jingyu carefully tying the strap on the fox fur cape she was wearing, his head lowered. Seeing her look at him, the man could not help but curved his lips up to reveal a gentle smile, his large hand clasping around her smaller hands. Still feel cold? A warm feeling rose up inside Qing Lanfei's heart, and she shook her head gently. I'm not cold. I'm feeling great. Xiao Ran, who had been walking in front, had come to a stop, and he watched the two of them with an amused look in his eyes before he said in a teasing tone, "This fella here really has become so different after getting yourself a woman, turned to become much more gentle and considerate." Upon saying that, he then looked at the slightly pale-faced woman and said with a laugh, "Little Lanfei, why don't you and I go to the brocade pavilion and have a seat there while we let this fella go see Big Brother by himself? It's a lot warmer over there." Qing Lanfei was surprised for a moment, and before she could even say anything, Mo Jingyu spoke up. "No need. Fei will be fine staying by my side." That must be a joke. He has not come back to the Hell King's palace for so many years, so who knew what kind of a place it has changed into now? How could he possibly allow Fei to leave his line of sight in such a situation? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Hearing that, Xiao Ran raised an eyebrow. What? Are you afraid that I'll gobble your woman right up? TSK, it really doesn't pay to be kind. He and Qing Lanfei could be said to be old acquaintances at the very least, and with his level of cultivation, he was naturally able to see the state the woman was currently in. It was clear that no matter how many layers she wore, there was no place the bitter chill here in the Hell King's palace was unable to reach, and exposing her to the chill for too long would harm her body greatly. And throughout the Hell King's palace, the single warmest place would only be the brocade pavilion, the place he resides in. Chapter 247. 2. I believe that you will definitely protect me. It was strange to say in the least. Ever since he accidentally fell into icy waters when he was very young, his body became unable to withstand even the slightest bit of the severe cold. If the bitter chill came to seep into his body, then that would really be torturous for him. Even just by showing them the way and right at that moment, he needed to summon up his spirit powers to resist the cold. Mo Jingyu knitted up his brows, and he was just about to refuse again when a soft hand came to rest over the back of his. The woman's soft voice then slowly rang out. Jingyu, go on ahead. In the Hell King's palace, the brocade pavilion might very well be the safest place. Of course she was aware of the man's worries. It was because of her that Mo Jingyu had left the Hell King's palace, and her current situation in that place was indeed rather dangerous. These people were not making any moves against her at that moment, but if they came to know her identity, it was thought that she would not be able to escape the Hell King's palace's mortal persecution. Within the woman's eyes that were gazing straight at him, he felt that they seemed to be conveying what she was trying to express wordlessly over to him. Finally, Mo Jingyu's hand that was holding her hand then released its grip, the expression on his face becoming grave as he turned to look at the frivolous and flippant Xiao Yiran. If Fei Air loses even one single hair on her head, then don't call me your brother anymore. Immediately upon saying that, he turned to leave without even looking back once. Xiao Yiran clenched his jaws a little hatefully. That fella still likes to threaten people just like before. And he just cannot help himself but still fall for it. Upon saying that, he glanced at Qing Lan Fei, who was staring after the man's departing back, and said, "Stop staring already. You will be fine. You should be worrying about yourself instead. If not for me protecting you here. Do you believe that once they come to know that you are the woman who caused their king to helplessly fall heads over heels for, and went on to abandon the Hell King's palace, they would destroy you so completely that there wouldn't be a single fragment of you left behind?" The Bright Moon Temple was originally dead set against the Hell King's palace like fire and water, the two sides always fighting to outdo one another. But Mo Jingyu just had to fall in love with an enemy, and had even abandoned them altogether, which caused everyone in the Hell King's palace to hate that evil seductress so vehemently. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Of course I believe that, but it's just that I believe in you a little more. Qing Lan Fei lowered her head to say with a smile, "Believe in me?" The expression on Xiao Yiran's face was a little surprised. "I believe that you will definitely protect me," Qing Lan Fei replied, and then raised her foot to go on ahead towards the brocade pavilion. Xiao Yiran was startled for a moment before he quickly went to catch up to the woman. His gaze was a little complicated as he said to her, "Are you so certain that I will definitely protect you?" He was born a person who killed without batting an eyelid, a cold-blooded and merciless man. People in the outside world have even nicknamed him as the Demon Azura. And just by hearing that name, anyone should know that he was anything but a good person. Chapter 247. 3. I believe that you will definitely protect me, but where was this lass here getting her confidence from? Even though she possessed an exceptionally captivating countenance, he was not someone that would succumb to beauty. As he was puzzling over that in his mind, he heard the woman laugh softly and said, "It is because I once saw you burrow into a mountain of corpses overflowing with blood to save a young little girl who was crying incessantly. Ever since then, rumors flew all over the place about how ruthless and venomous you were, not sparing even such a young child. Not knowing that you did not kill her. That child had miraculously survived through the bitter battle between two mighty powers, and you were the one who saved her, even going to great lengths to take care of her. Big brother, you've come back." As he spoke, a soft gushy voice suddenly sounded further up in front, the voice tinged with delight. Qing Lan Fei raised her eyes to look, and saw that it was a petite little girl, bundled up in thick clothes, which made her look like a clumsy little animal. Her face was exquisitely adorable, and her eyes were filled with a naive innocence that were still ignorant of the ways of the world. When Xiao Yiran saw the girl who had suddenly appeared, he creased up his brows in slight displeasure. "Didn't I ask you not to come out here so carelessly? Why do you just refuse to listen?" The man's tone was not entirely happy, and the expression on his face looked a little annoyed. The look of delight on the girl's face then froze, before she then lowered her head timidly and said in a tiny squeak, "I'm sorry." Nwan heard Big Brother's voice and could not stop myself from running straight out to see you. I won't do it again next time. Seeing the submissively obedient look on her, as she admitted her mistake, no matter how angry Xiao Ran was feeling, it immediately dissipated. Moreover, he was not angry with her at all, but was just worried that she would meet with unnecessary danger by running out here like that. Seeing that, the ends of Qing Lan Fei's lips curved up as she bent down to look at the little girl to say in a tender voice, "Is your name Nuan? It's such a nice-sounding name." When the little girl saw the unfamiliar-looking woman in that instant, she was initially rather timid and uneasy. But it was probably because Qing Lan Fei was just too affable and quickly puts people around her at ease. The little girl quickly forgot the unease she felt and went on to smile shyly. Big Brother gave me that name. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You hearing that? The smiles in Qing Lan Fei's eyes grew warmer. Why not Nuan go play and have some fun? Your big brother and I have some adult things to talk about, and you might be bored listening to us talk. Although Nuan was young, she had a highly perceptive and intelligent mind. Upon hearing Qing Lan Fei's words, she immediately understood that the conversation was not meant for her ears. Always a meek and obedient girl, she nodded her head and went back into the house. Xiao Ran was a little surprised to see that, as that little imp had always only listened to him, and not anybody else. And as her entire family clan was annihilated, back when she had just been brought here in the beginning, she was like a prickly little hedgehog, wary and highly guarded against everyone around her. Fortunately, she had slowly started to trust him as time went by, but with just a few words from Qing Lan Fei just now, she managed to get the little one to leave so docilely. Chapter 247. 4. I believe that you will definitely protect me. Hey, you are rather great with kids. Xiao Ran laughed and said, "If my memory serves me correctly, I seem to remember you had a twin sister called Nuan in the past." Qing Lan Fei said with an indiscernible smile on her lips. A person who has such a tender heart. I really do not feel that such a person could possibly be all that bad. Rumors are merely rumors, and they can't be taken to be the truth entirely. A corner of Xiao Ran's mouth twitched. What a terrifying woman. I really don't know anything that could escape that pair of eyes of yours. Do you know? If my twin Nuan had been just as lucky to have been rescued, she might be about the same age as you now, and have a soulmate to treat her with a sincere heart, living happily after. Xiao Ran's voice was tinged with a hoarseness for an instant. He was staring off into the distance, seemingly deep in thought. His mind drifted far away into the past. Qing Lan Fei looked at him and hesitated for a good while before reaching out to gently pat the man's tense straight back. She is definitely living safely and happily in another world, and it's for your sake as well. Moreover, didn't the heavens take pity on you and sent this little Nuan to keep you company? Nuan had not gone too far away from there, and even though she was unable to hear their conversation, she could still see them. Her two small hands were casually packing a snowball, and she seemed to feel the woman's gaze on her when she raised her head up and turned to look at her. Qing Lan Fei smiled and waved at her. The little girl's eyes immediately flashed with a bright sparkle, and she came tottering over as quickly as she could over the snow. She first cast a careful glance to see the expression on Xiao Ran's face before asking Qing Lan Fei timidly, "Has Big Sister finished talking to Big Brother?" Qing Lan Fei nodded with a smile. "Your big brother said earlier that he hates himself, because he is a nefarious and evil villain whose hands are stained with blood." Her voice had just fallen when the weak and timid little girl, before her suddenly seemed to change into a completely different person, her face becoming extremely agitated, her voice coming out of her throat in a scream like an uncaged beast. "He is not nefarious and evil. Big Brother is the goodest person in the whole wide world." It was probably Xiao Ran's first time seeing the little girl get so angry, and he was stunned in that one rare moment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Lan Fei held her lips tightly pressed together and held back her laughter. With a serious face, she nodded and chirped in. I think that he is a good person as well. Hearing the woman agree with her, little Nuan then retracted that ferocious look of an angry little beast on her face, and started to play happily with the woman once again, exactly like a young child. Xiao ran as silent for a long while before he lowered his head and muttered in a self-mocking tone. It's just impossible to anyone to detest you. On another side of the realm, Mo Jingyu was able to find his way easily from memory to that familiar place, a complicated feeling rising up in his heart as he slowly made his way inside. Along the way here, Xiao Ran had told him that ever since he left this place, that person had never once stepped out of this place before. Chapter 248. 1. Another plot arises in her mind. That man had been like a father, an existence who was also like an elder brother to him. He had never ever played the role of a villain, but he knew in his heart that the man was no angel as well. You've returned. His thoughts had drifted far, far away when a man's voice sounded in his ears. He was suddenly pulled back to his senses, and that was when he discovered that he had unconsciously walked his way into the palace that man resided in. A man sat with his back facing him, his hand holding a teapot raised high up in the air, as he prepared tea. Hidden behind a screen, the man's figure could not be seen clearly, but just the wisps of steam rising up into the air from the hot tea. Aren't you coming over here? Ha! You've been away so long that everything feels distant and unfamiliar, doesn't it? That man said slowly with a soft chuckle. Mo Jingyu's face became startled, and he suppressed the emotions that were coming to show in his eyes. He made his way around the screen, and when there was no screen blocking his view of the man, Mo Jingyu's eyes immediately flared wide when he laid eyes upon him. Big brother. The man sat there cross-legged as he prepared tea, and his head then slowly turned to look at him. A smile slowly rose at the corners of his lips, and he then acknowledged Mo Jingyu's call with a simple That gently handsome countenance had his head of white hair bound up with a jade crown, exuding a kind of beauty that transcended time. Mo Jingyu took a few steps forward, crouching down as he held a lock of the man's white hair draped over his shoulder, his voice in disbelief as he asked, Big brother, your hair. How did it become like this? For a man who had surpassed the big 1,000-year mark, he would not show the slightest sign of aging, even over another 1,000 years. So what is going on? With his full head of white hair? The man smiled and swept Mo Jingyu's hand away. It's nothing. It has merely turned white. I won't die from it. What happened to you? How did your hair turn into this? Mo Jingyu asked in a grave voice, his brows deeply furrowed. I merely paid a small price in order to preserve your fragile iced-up heart. As long as your heart does not die, then you would continue to live. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You hearing that? Mo Jingyu's raised hand then fell limply beside him. He just knew it. Even though Fei Air had sacrificed herself and their children back then, that wouldn't be enough to allow him, who was so severely injured, to be resurrected that easily. No one knew it better than him. The core of his lifeblood was this unique heart of his that was completely one of a kind. No matter how gravely injured his body was, it would not pose to become that great of a threat to his life, because his ice-core heart possessed self-healing powers. So he did not fear shedding blood, nor was he afraid of injury. But back at that time, that venomous woman had caught him off guard and laid a curse on his heart without him knowing anything, wrecking him right at his core. His core vitality was severely damaged, making him incredibly weak. Chapter 248. 2. Another plot arises, but when he came awake this time, not only did he not feel the slightest discomfort, he felt that his heart was even stronger than before. He had always thought that Fei Air had employed some secret technique that allowed him to avert disaster, never once thinking that the Hell King's palace's power had been mixed into it as well. But it had clearly been said before that once he left the place, he would no longer be a king in this place. So even when he was caught in such a perilous predicament, he had never once thought to seek help from the Hell King's palace. But this person here had still moved to save him. Big brother, There is no need for me to hear any words of gratitude, as such frivolity is not needed between me and you. The man interrupted Mo Jingyu, a faint smile on his lips. Mo Jingyu's eyes darkened. Isn't it said that the moment I leave this place, all ties between us would be severed? So, why did you take such great effort to save me? That was what I thought as well. The man curved up his lips as he said, before he pushed the cup of tea. He had just finished preparing towards the man. Having been brothers for so many years where we spared no effort to build up the Hell King's palace. Can you imagine how disappointed I was when you told me you were giving all that up for the sake of just one woman? Mo Jingyu remained silent as he listened to the man speak, his lips pressed tightly together, without saying a single word in response. Even though you abandoned the Hell King's palace, you are still a king of this place, and we have always been waiting for you to come back. Having finally touched on the main topic at hand, Mo Jingyu then knitted his brows and started to say, Big brother, I only came here this time to see you, and have no intentions of returning back to this place. I still have some unfinished business to deal with. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man's long slender fingers lightly flicked at a bubble floating on the surface of the tea, and he then said in a soft voice, You're going to avenge the things that happened back then? With the current strength of the Divine Temple today, we do not need to fear them at all. Why do you need to do it yourself? It must be because of that woman. Yes, Mo Jingyu did not deny it. That was something that belonged to Fei Air in the first place, and I am going to take it all back for her one by one. I do not need the Hell King's palace's help, and I ask that Big Brother does not stop me. I've made a trip back here, and I bid for Big Brother to take good care of yourself. Upon saying that, Mo Jingyu then got up and went walking outside. Are you really not willing to return back to us no matter what? Behind him, the man's voice rose slowly, tonelessly without a ripple of emotion. Even when I have aged prematurely in order to save you. Mo Jingyu's footsteps paused for a moment, though he did not turn his head back as he said, I will never forget the benevolence Big Brother has shown me. If there is anything that you need me to do for you, I will never reject you. But when it comes to something like freedom, it is something too precious and important, so I would like to be able to have full control over it. Chapter 248. 3. Another plot arises. Why does Big Brother persist in believing in the prophecy that only one who possessed the icy glass heart can claim kingship? You're better and stronger than me in everything, and is more suited to be the ruler of the Hell King's palace than I am. Immediately after saying that, he did not stay there any longer, but walked straight out from the palace. It was eerily quiet in that vast palace, empty and devoid of people, where not even a single servant could be seen. And with the kind of climate they had in that place, it only made the place feel more desolate and dead. The man sat there sipping at his tea in silence, until the sound of footsteps outside the palace were heard. A person appeared before the doors a far distance away, and his knees bent to crash heavily onto the floor. Your subordinates' incompetence has allowed them to escape. All of you are not even able to watch over a single woman. It seems like you've all fallen too lax. The man's voice said tonelessly, Please quell your anger. The fact is because I let them go. The first man had not even finished speaking when he was suddenly interrupted by another voice that rang out suddenly. Xiao Yiran waved his hand, indicating for the first man to be dismissed. When the latter saw that, he bowed his head and retreated from the place. What, even you are going against me now? The man's eyes narrowed, and a dangerous look spread over his handsome countenance. What could possibly change even if you forcibly make them stay? Might as well just let them go, and leave Mo Jingyu with a good impression. Xiao Yiran went on to explain. The man suddenly burst out laughing. I haven't realized since when did you turn to become a good person? I remember that your relationship with Jingyu's woman isn't all that shallow. Is it because of her? Xiao Yiran raised an eyebrow. Big Brother is being suspicious for nothing. I have merely given them a way out, and you immediately think that I have feelings for that woman. The two of us cannot possibly always be villains, you know? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Hearing that, the man seemed a little surprised. You mean to say that you released them because you wanted to win their trust first, so you'll be able to make your move in an entirely different manner? You can say that. Xiao Ran nodded his head with a smile. When have you ever seen me being kind? Every move I make carries a motive behind it. You're really one step ahead of me. I have been too quick to judge. The man's lips then curved up into a gentle smile once more. Seeming to recall something suddenly, he opened his mouth to say, "It seems like Jingyu and that woman had offsprings carrying their blood. I had people go look into it. They had a pair of dragon and phoenix twin, didn't they?" Xiao Ran looked a little startled. "What about it?" "Looks like you know about it as well. Maybe you can make your move from that." The man said meaningfully, "If his children are both here in the Hell King's palace, do you think he still can bear to leave the place?" Chapter 248. 4. Another plot arises. Xiao Ran was stunned for a while, and he then asked in a somewhat surprised voice, "Big brother, are you thinking that we should catch Jingyu's twin rascals and keep them here in order to be able to control him? He wouldn't do that, would he? Isn't that a little unethical?" Probably guessing what was on Xiao Ran's mind, the man went on to say, seemingly unbothered, "As long as it makes Jingyu remain here in the Hell King's palace, does it matter even if the method used is a little despicable? I'll just leave this matter in your hands." "Me? Didn't you just gain their trust earlier? You will be most suited for that task, as they will not have their guard up against you," the man said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Just go get it done. Before the mine-free peak opens up, Jingyu must definitely show up here in the Hell King's palace. To learn the way to gain eternal life and achieve immortality. Who wouldn't want that?" Bright Moon Temple, second only to the Temple Lord's sleeping chambers, the Star Priest Palace was the most luxurious and resplendent place that was filled with mystery. After he was struck by that mysterious force the other night, he only showed signs of improvement after a few days' recuperation. "Grand Priestess, Yufan has brought the person here," a voice said respectfully outside. Song Jian was taken aback for a moment. He had completely forgotten about it. The Temple Lord had said a few days ago that she would be transferring an attendant girl over, and he had been puzzled back then why the mere transfer of an attendant girl had needed the Temple Lord to tell him personally. But the Temple Lord had told him of her real intentions after that. The attendant girl did not seem to be someone ordinary, and she was sending the girl here so that he could look into it properly and keep a close watch on the girl. Remembering that, Song Jian's interest was piqued. He opened his mouth and then said, "Let them come in." A moment later, the handsome and cold-faced Yufun, who was dressed in full black clothes, then came walking in, with a young lady in light pink in tow, right behind him. The Bright Moon Temple's female attendant uniform was almost the same color and design throughout. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But on this young lady, the clothes looked exceptionally different. It was probably because that face of hers was really just too exquisite and beautiful. The highly noble air the young lady carried just could not be diminished, even by the inferior quality of the female attendant's uniform in the slightest. "Greetings to the Grand Priest." Yufan bowed his head slightly to say, greeting in a neither servile nor impertinent manner. He served directly under the Temple Lord, and that was why he did not need to kneel before any other person, even before the revered and highly respected Grand Priest. "Lord Yufan, I've troubled you to bring the person all the way here." Song Jian greeted politely. "This is part of my duty. I shall now leave the lass in the Grand Priest's good care. She is rather obstinate, and it could be because she has only just begun that she is finding it hard to receive instructions," Yufan said without emotion, seeming to be helping Qingyu set a favorable impression. Chapter 249. 1. Merely just a pawn. In the end, it must be said that even Qingyu herself was surprised by that. Hasn't this fella always shown nothing but disdain for her? And here he is speaking up for her? Does he have something up his sleeve? Song Jian looked like he was similarly surprised as well, but his face quickly regained its usual composure. He smiled and nodded his head, as he went on to say, "Lord Yufan does not have to worry. I will not let the lass lose an arm or a leg in here. Hearing that, Qingyu could not help but feel a corner of her mouth twitch. Why do those words sound so forbidding? I will have to trouble the Grand Priest then. Yufan nodded in response. Before he left, he reminded Qingyu again to not stir up trouble, and then departed from the place. Song Jian watched Yufan's back as he gradually walked away into the distance, and then turned his gaze upon the young lady before him. Not to mention anything else, but just seeing the young girl's calm and composed demeanor was strange to say the least. It was said that she was brought here from the lower realms, and faced with a completely unfamiliar environment. She was not feeling the slightest bit of panic or fear at all. So how could she possibly be a young little lady who had not seen much of the world? Although that was what Song Jian thought in his mind, his face did not show a ripple of emotion, but just curved up the ends of his lips to say, "Little lass, what is your name?" "Yu Qing." Qingyu returned with a pure and harmless smile, not batting an eyelid nor blushing in the slightest, as she gave the name she had become so used to. Song Jian nodded his head and said to her, "Yu Qing, from now onwards, you are part of the Star Priest Palace. Someone will bring you around to let you familiarize yourself with this place. You will have a lot of freedom here in the Star Priest Palace, unlike the other palaces with their tedious and elaborate tasks. All you have to do here is to tidy up the texts and scrolls here in the Star Priest Palace every day. It's really that easy." Qingyu could not help but feel a little doubtful. She had thought that the woman had sent her here to do some hard labor. There has been quite a number of cases where nameless nobodies who started tidying texts and scrolls here that went on to become someone outstanding in a single leap. It all depends on yourself, as the mystical secrets within these texts are endless. Song Jian's eyes were deep as he looked at her, his tone meaningful as he said those words. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qingyu blinked her eyes. Impossible to see whether she really understood as she nodded her head. "I will do my best, You may go now," Song Jian said and waved his hand dismissively. A white-robed man standing at the door immediately came walking in to bring Qingyu out. After a while, within the empty Star Priest Palace, a gentle and melodious woman's voice rang out all of a sudden. "How?" Song Jian slowly turned around, and then bowed respectfully as he greeted. "Song Jian is incompetent. I was not able to spot anything unusual." "Oh, you mean to say that she is merely just an ordinary little lass from the lower realms?" Chapter 249. 2. Merely just a pawn in the end in the seat that Song Jian has just sitting in was a seductively slender figure of a woman leaning back lazily, with an enchanting and alluring countenance. Her pair of sultry-looking almond-shaped eyes were slightly narrowed, her fair and smooth-skinned arm propping up her chin. The bright cinnabar red on her nails struck a stark contrast against her snow-white skin, making her look extraordinarily demonically icy. Qing Luoyan had extremely beautiful looks, and compared to when she was a young lady, she now possessed an additional charm of maturity, her every action sultry and highly seductive. Impossible to resist falling under her spell, unable to extricate themselves. Together with the fact that her cultivation technique supplemented her with countenance-freezing skill, it made her look younger and more beautiful, and it was impossible to see that she was a woman who had lived more than 600 years. Whenever Song Jian was faced with such a sultry and openly seductive temple lord, it was impossible for him to stop himself and rein in his maniacally thumping heart. But he had never dared to express his feelings, because he knew that there was only one person in the Temple Lord's heart, and no other man would be able to win her attention, even if it was merely as a substitute to alleviate the loneliness. He merely cast a quick glance to look at her, before quickly turning his eyes away. "I beg for the Temple Lord's forgiveness. Maybe it's because the time was too short today, but the lass would be living right under my nose from now onwards, and she would surely reveal her real self one fine day. What I want to know is whether she is related to Qing Lanfei in any way." Qing Luoyan's voice was cold, a sliver of impatience tinged between her brows. "You must understand that you had come to assume the position of Grand Priest, not because you really possess exceptional abilities, It is because you helped to bring down the divine temple from the inside, while working together with me back then, and earned yourself some merit, that convinced me to allow you to take up the Grand Priest's position. If you show yourself to be of no further use to me, there is no lack of people who would be able to replace you in the divine temple. Song Jian's face turned slightly pale for an instant. That's right. Having been in that high position for so long, he had almost forgotten how he came to win it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He had to become a traitor. In cahoots with Qing Luo Yen to strike from inside and outside, eliminating the godly lord without anyone knowing, and purging out the divine temple's previous faction overnight, to install Qing Luo Yen onto the throne as the new temple lord. Everything had happened unbelievably smoothly. As the godly lord's last remaining bloodline, with the god's unexpected departure, it was only natural that she would inherit the divine temple. Only he knew everything that happened in the divine temple clearly that fateful night. The only reason that he was still alive was because Qing Luo Yen knew that he would never ever betray her. Not just the fact that she was aware that Song Jian had feelings for her, but because every single person in the divine temple had a curse laid upon them, making it impossible for anyone to betray her, or they would suffer severe backlash from the curse, dying a horrible and extremely painful death. Chapter 249. 3. Merely just a pawn in the end, everything has been predetermined, perfectly and carefully calculated. The expression on Song Jian's face darkened, and he replied in a low voice, "Your subordinate will uncover that young lady's real identity as quickly as possible. The temple lord can set your mind at ease. That would be best," Qing Luo Yen said nonchalantly, and her figure disappeared from the chair in the next instant. Song Jian could not help but smile bitterly to himself. In the end, he was merely just a useful chess piece to the temple lord. On the other side, after the white-robed man brought Qing Yu to a wide and spacious place, he then left without a word, leaving Qing Yu to stand there alone, lost and bewildered. She was told, "Where are the texts and scrolls? Why is it that she does not see anything at all?" "Qing Yu," the soft tender voice of a woman rang out slowly, and the half-translucent figure of Qi Yu appeared at her side. Qing Yu was shocked for a moment before she quickly said, "Why have you shown yourself? What if you are seen by someone? Hurry up and go back." "It's all right. Besides you, no one else can see me." Qi Yu gave her a reassuring smile. Hearing that, Qing Yu did not insist on asking her to go back any further. Qi Yu took a couple of steps forward, and then opened her mouth to say, "Are you finding it strange why you are unable to see any scrolls?" Qing Yu's eyes flared wide in surprise. "They're really here? And you can see them?" Qi Yu's gaze grew sharp. "Actually, it is actually quite a tough task that Song Jian has given you. He must be testing you." "What do you mean?" "Only two kinds of people can see these scrolls. The first type are extraordinary people who are born with yin-yang sight, also called the third eye, and the second type." Qi Yu paused for a moment when she said that, before turning around to look at her. "Are dead people?" When Qing Yu heard those words, she said in an incredulous tone, "Is he just toying with me for his own amusement?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. When he said that all she needed to do was to tidy up some scrolls, she had thought it strange that it would be so simple. So this was what he had hidden up his sleeve. Qi Yu saw Qing Yu's infuriated face, and she shook her head with a smile. "But besides those two types of people, there is another way for one to see them." Qing Yu contemplated for a moment, before she arched up an eyebrow. "You mean, having one's consciousness leave their body, to fall into a state of suspended animation?" "Smart," Qi Yu said with admiration in her eyes. "Because these scrolls came into existence as a result from a lifetime of sweat and blood of mighty entities from thousands and thousands of years ago. Although they have died, but remnants of their consciousness still dwell within those scrolls. Hence these scrolls are spiritual in nature, and only when one is in spirit form would they be able to see them." Chapter 249. "For, merely just a pawn in the end, so I see." Qing Yu nodded in understanding. Then, Seeming to suddenly remember something, she went on to ask the woman, "Did Song Jian tidy and arrange scrolls many years back like this as well?" Her question caught the woman a little off guard. Qiyu was stunned for a moment before she replied in a slow tone. "How did you know that he tidied scrolls before?" "It was just a wild guess," Qingyu shrugged her shoulders to say, thinking nothing of it. From the tone of his voice when he said that, he revealed some minute details, so it wasn't that hard to guess it. "And looking at you, it seems like I got that right." "You are correct. He and I were just lowly nobodies in charge of tidying up texts and scrolls back in those days." Qiyu lowered her eyes and started to say in a seemingly mocking tone, "Although we were insignificant and unremarkable, we dreamt that we would become an outstanding priest and priestess. There was one time that our godly lord happened to come to the scroll chamber, and seeing that the two of us were rather gifted and extremely hardworking, he took us out from the scroll chamber. He even got a highly renowned and respected elder to teach and guide us, the godly lord's benevolence giving us a completely new lease of life. Unfortunately, from the very day that Song Jian came out from the scroll chamber, he immediately yearned to have much more than what we already had, his insatiable ambition changing him completely into a stranger to me. In the end, he turned traitor and became the executioner who brought down the divine temple, a heartless and ruthless contemptible beast." Speaking up to that point, Qiyu's words seemed to be squeezed out through tightly clenched teeth, every single syllable spat out with nothing but contempt. It was clear to see how much she detested Song Jian, but after finishing those words, she seemed to realize that she had lost her composure there for a moment, and she quickly recovered herself. "Apologies, my mind drifted back into the past for a while, and I lost control of myself for a moment." Qingyu smiled and replied, "It's all right. That is completely understandable. Let us get back to how you are going to be able to see these scrolls," Qiyu said as she stretched out a translucent hand towards the young lady. "You just need to hold my hand, and you should be able to see them. That's all it takes." Qingyu was a little doubtful, but she still stretched her own hand out to grasp the woman's. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You are the princess child, and your body should at least be holding some of her abilities. Back then, the princess was the only person who was able to see the scrolls without needing to go through any channels. Qingyu had not even heard the woman finish her words when she suddenly saw everything before her eyes turn blur for an instant, and her eyes that had seen nothing but a vast empty space suddenly saw a dizzying sight, dazzling her as hundreds and hundreds of faintly glowing objects floated in the air, all of them in differing shapes and sizes. Qingyu's gaze then turned to look upon a text manual glowing with a silvery light, wondering in her heart what could be recorded in there. The next moment, the book seemed to take on a life of its own as it started flipping its pages very quickly. In that book was a record of a top-level elixir formula that had been lost to the world for a very long time. It could be said to be something that any elixir cultivator would devote their entire life to pursue, as attaining it would allow them to reach the heavens in a single bound, or even make them a god. Chapter 250. 1. Come here and I guarantee I won't beat you to death. If a scroll with such heaven-defying power was leaked out into the world, no one knows how big of a stir it would come to cause. Qiyu saw the shocked expression on Qingyu's face, and could not help but laugh softly before she said, "The Bright Moon Temple's scroll chambers is something that many powers in Cloud Heaven are always eyeing voraciously. But it's a pity that they do not know the secret behind this place. So even when the scroll chambers is actually right before their eyes, none of them are able to take a single peep." When she heard that, Qingyu suddenly thought of something and asked in a puzzled tone, "Is the way to see the scrolls known only by people in the Divine Temple?" "Not exactly." Qiyu shook her head. "In fact, beside the godly lord himself and people who are in charge of tidying the scroll chambers, no one else knows. And after the passing of the godly lord, the only people who knows about the scroll chamber's secret will be Song Jian and me." Sigh. Unfortunately, Song Jian's heart harbored evil intentions, and he turned traitor. He should be unable to see the scroll chambers now, Or why will he allow the scroll chambers to fall into such a dilapidated state? He would surely have taken all of it to win that venomous woman's favor in the first instance. Qiyu said mockingly. I see. Qingyu nodded in understanding. No wonder he made me come here. Firstly, he wants to test to see who I really am. And secondly, as he is unable to enter the scroll chambers anymore, so it looks like this wouldn't be the first time that he has sent people here to this place. Pinning his hopes onto others, and maybe among the myriad mix of so many people, a miracle might just happen. Qingyu clicked her tongue at that thought, thinking that Song Jian must be feeling highly helpless to come up with such a foolish plan. Concentrating her mind on the task at hand, all the scrolls floating around in a messy and disorderly fashion were quickly placed back onto the shelves, neatly organized and in their proper places. Qingyu. The expression on Qiyu's face was stunned as she looked at the young lady. Did she not know what kind of a commotion her actions would bring about? The scroll chambers was where the divine temple's core lay. Once the scrolls were returned back to their rightful places, a clear and obvious change would come over the entire place. Like what was happening right at this moment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qiyu's gaze deepened as she saw the spirit energy becoming more robust in the surrounding air. They would not be able to hide it any longer. Qingyu gave the woman a reassuring smile. Don't worry. I know what I am doing. Since I've decided that I am going to take that woman down, remaining in hiding and not showing myself would not be the smart thing to do. But it's really too dangerous for you to be doing this, Qiyu said with deeply furrowed brows. If Qing Luoyan finds out that you're the princess daughter, she will not find out, and I will not let her know that so soon, Qingyu said with her eyes curved up into smiling crescents, her exquisite-looking countenance enchanting and alluring. Not only will I make her be fearful of me, I will make her favor me greatly. Chapter 250. 2. Come here and I guarantee I won't beat you to death. How is that even possible? Qing Luoyan was such a wary person, who was suspicious of everything, where even Song Jian, who had turned traitor to help her, was not able to completely gain her trust. What's more towards her Qingyu, who looked so much like the princess. In response to the woman's question, Qingyu merely gave her a profound and unfathomable look and said, anything is possible. Moreover, my luck has always been very good. On another side of Cloud Heaven, in the dark lands thousands of miles away, reporting to the Overlord, the tail end of things have been thoroughly cleaned up. Great. You can be dismissed. Lu Junyao answered, and gave his hand a dismissive wave at the black-robed man outside the door. Everyone who had been engaged in discussion then exchanged quizzical glances with each other. What's going on? Why is the Overlord acting so mysteriously recently? No one seems to know what kind of a scheme the Overlord was secretly withholding on his mind. Seated beside Bai Zhiyan, Sun Luo could not help asking in a whisper. What has the Overlord been up to recently? How would I know? Bai Zhiyan threw a question back with a bewildered look on his face. You are the Overlord's most trusted right-hand man, and you are closest to him among all of us here. So how could you possibly not know anything? Sun Luo said with a sneer, the look on his face saying, forget it if you don't want to tell me, but don't take me for a fool. Bai Zhiyan looked highly aggrieved. I really do not know, all right. But fortunately, Lu Junyao did not keep them guessing for too long as he opened his mouth to explain. That fella Mo Jingyu was taken away by people from the Hell King's palace the moment he came out from the barbarian tribe. But he has fortunately come back out. He is currently being followed by the Hell King's palace's people in secret, and I merely gave him a helping hand. So that's what happened. Doesn't the Overlord dislike this particular elder? And you actually voluntarily lent a hand to help him this time? Meiji asked, an eyebrow raised in puzzlement. Has the Lord switched personalities? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Aunt Lan is there by his side, and I do not want to risk anything. Lu Junyao said nonchalantly. The Aunt Lan I've heard about in the legends has been resurrected? Meiji's eyes grew wide, the expression on her face becoming excited. She was really very curious. with their haughtily willful and tyrannical overlord who feared neither heaven or earth, always doing anything he pleased and death to anyone who went against him. She heard that this Aunt Lon was the one and only person who was able to make him lower his head before her and obediently submit himself to heed her words. Lu Junyao was rather amused as he looked at Meiji and said, "No need to be so surprised. You'll be meeting her sooner or later." Unexpectedly, his voice had just fallen when Bai Jiyan's voice sounded out lazily. "How utterly ignorant. Is that really so surprising to hear? If you come to realize that the future lady of these dark lands is actually Aunt Lan's very own daughter, wouldn't your eyes then pop right out of your head?" Chapter 253. Come here and I guarantee I won't beat you to death. He was halfway through his words when he felt a chill air blow across his back. He turned his head to look and saw Lu Junyao looking expressionlessly at him, as all the others stared at him with their mouths agape, with the ever-cool and suave little monster being the lone exception. But it seemed like he had known about it all along. A mute silence fell over the place at that moment, strangely quiet. Bai Jiyan blinked his pretty eyes innocently and started to say sheepishly, "About that. Did I just say something that I shouldn't have? So you knew about it all along?" Meiji said with a seductive smile at the edge of her lips, her voice gentle. Gossiping is an innate trait of most women, and Meiji had always been very curious about those two people. One of them was Aunt Lon, an elder that the overlord had always said he respected, and the other one was the mysterious young lady who got their overlord so smitten that made him go running down to the lower realm over and over again and not come back in spite of the risk to his own well-being. She had privately tried to find out more from Bai Jiyan many times before, but that fella had refused to breathe a word about it, only complaining that he always had to pick up the pieces from the mess the overlord left behind, and was too busy doing that to pay any attention to the overlord's personal relationships. In the end, he had just accidentally let it slip out, revealing the matter to everyone. It was clear that not only did he know about it, but he knew all the details as well. Bai Jiyan came to realize what he had done, as he unintentionally revealed a very big secret here. About that, Meiji, I suddenly remembered. I think my father sent word asking me to make a trip back to the Divine Healers sect. You'll have to wait till I come back if you have anything to ask me. I'll say, this young lord of the Divine Healers sect always suddenly turns into a fool when he tries to lie. Have you forgotten that your father said that he wanted to sever all ties with his unfilial son you a good 100 years ago? And you are now telling me that he actually sent word to you and has asked you to go back? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Meiji really wanted to laugh out loud at Bai Jiyan's words. But even though the guy was acting like a fool before her, it was not going to appease her anger. She detested people who tried to take her for a fool the most throughout her life. Little monster, are you not going to bother with this at all? Bai Jiyan saw the seductive woman flick her hair with a flourish and stood up from her chair, looking like she was going to do something horrifying to him, causing him to immediately cringe in fear. It must be known that although he possessed unsurpassed skills in medicine, known to be the top few throughout Cloud Heaven, elixir cultivators were only strong in curing illnesses and injuries. One could never be highly skilled in healing and possess powerful battle prowess. Bai Jiyan's battle skills might be good enough to kill a whole horde of people down in the lower realm, but before the chief of the 12 courtesans, the Dark Land's most prolific killers, he was reduced to become an existence so small that it could not even fill up the gap between a person's teeth. Chapter 254. Come here and I guarantee I won't beat you to death. Moreover, he doesn't want to fight a woman, all right? Bai Jiyan watched Meiji closing in on him one step at a time, and quickly decided to scuttle away from there by executing the instant teleportation technique. Meiji snorted derisively and her rage had reached boiling point, so she went after Bai Jiyan in pursuit. The rest of the people there were strangely calm as they watched the fracas unfold. In resplendent white clothes, the outstandingly handsome man with scarlet-red eyes turned his gaze away from the spot where the two people just disappeared from. His voice was clear and melodious. The Dark Lands has enjoyed peace these years, and our fighting might has deteriorated very much from the past. But if we are really thrown into a battle with the other powers, we might still not lose. If our overlord has already come to any decision, all of us here do not fear that anything will be able to stop us. You know what I am going to say? Lu Junyao laughed softly, the expression on his face a little amused. My lord has made it fairly obvious to see. Little Monster's eyes narrowed very slightly. Mo Jingyu is chieftain of the barbarian tribe, but he handed down his seat to his good friend Yin Shu many years ago. He was thought to be a free man, and no one ever thought that he had secret links with the Hell King's palace. Now that my overlord has helped Mo Jingyu to get rid of his obstacles, we would have offended the Hell King's palace. As for that Aunt Lon I heard, her real identity is that she is actually the Divine Temple's godly lord's daughter. With her return, there won't be peace in the Divine Temple. And with the Hunters Guild being so intricately linked to the Divine Temple, this will stir up at least 3 mighty powers. It looks like the rain in Cloud Heaven would see some changes very soon. Ho! You really live up to your position as the Darklands military strategist, to be able to decipher what I am thinking so accurately. Lu Junyao slowly curled up the ends of his lips, his mesmerizing violet eyes swirling deeply with a tumultuous tempest. Indeed, the upheaval in Cloud Heaven has gone on for too long, and it is time for the chaos to run amok. The Darklands are the ones who should rule over Cloud Heaven. The Hell King's palace and whatever else, Mine Free Peak. All of that will become conquered lands that had fallen beneath his feet. It was night, filled with endless dark black clouds, where not a single star could be seen, the ominous sky seemingly heralding an impending storm. Qing Luo Yen was a careful and wary person, and hence she never liked to have attendants waiting on her at night. The serving maids who usually waited on her knew her habits, so they would always only tidy up her room, light a candle, and everyone would immediately recuse themselves. The vast and spacious sleeping chambers were empty, which felt rather sparse and desolate. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qing Luo Yan's eyes were closed as she lay under the warm blankets, but her body did not feel a single sliver of warmth. For some unknown reason tonight, she still did not feel the slightest bit of sleepiness. It was not known whether it was because of the impending rain. The air felt strangely stifling, making people rather uncomfortable. Unable to sleep, she decided that she was not going to try any longer. She got down from the bed and went to open the window. Coincidentally, the dull roll of thunder drummed through the sky at that same moment, and rain fell heavily immediately after. The storm came so fast it caught her a little off guard, and Qing Luo Yen was a little dazed. How long has it been that Cloud Heaven saw such a torrential downpour? Chapter 251. Why kill me? She could still remember faintly that the last time it rained so heavily was when her father found out that she was practicing forbidden arts and had murdered many of her sisters. If he had not been so hard-hearted as to want to destroy her cultivated powers and throw her out of the Divine Temple, but just considered for a moment their father and daughter relationship, she would not have committed such a seditious deed. It was said that the godly lord had failed to get past his 1000th-year tribulation and had died unexpectedly. They would of course not know that the godly lord's failure to make it past his tribulation was just a lie. The real reason behind his death was that she destroyed his lifetime's worth of cultivation, and he died as his life essence withered away. If it had been any regular mortal, destroying their cultivation would only turn them into a normal person. But her godly father had been very highly advanced in age, and was approaching the critical 1000-year-old juncture. It was not possible for him to survive having his powers destroyed. Murdering one's own father. How big a sin is that? But how can anyone blame her for that? If only her father had not sought to carry things so far, seeking to sever all ties with her, and to announce it to the world. What she just absolutely could not accept was, when he said he wanted to hand over the position as the Lord of the Divine Temple over to Qing Lan Fei. She had always known that father favored Qing Lan Fei the most among all his daughters. Even when she had pushed all the blame onto Qing Lan Fei, besides being a little disappointed, father had not punished Lan Fei that harshly, but had instead sent people to secretly watch over her. Throwing Lan Fei out of the divine temple had only been a show put up for others to see. He had never once truly believed that Qing Lan Fei would commit such a misdeed, as his youngest daughter had always been so sweet and obedient. So what if he came to discover the entire truth in the end? She would never allow him to reveal it. Since he was not giving her a way out, then he would have to die. Qing Luoyan's long attractive eyes turned hazy as she stared into the rain under the night sky. Under the soft candlelight, her seductive countenance was deep and unfathomable. The rain became heavier and heavier, seeping inside along the window's edges. Qing Luoyan's eyes narrowed, and she stretched her hand out to close the window. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She had just closed it halfway when she suddenly saw a red figure walk past. Her gaze sharpened and her hand froze mid-action. Under the pouring rain in the night, the slender figure stood there silently, clad in a thin red dress, looking rather pitiful. Qing Luoyan shouted out coldly, "Who is it out there playing tricks?" The figure seemed to be shocked by her sudden shout, as it froze for a moment. The figure then slowly turned around, the exquisitely flawless countenance washed pale by the torrential rain. But it did not diminish the face's beauty in the slightest. Chapter 251. 2. Why kill me? That face, just like always, was stunningly breathtaking. The countenance of all 11 goddesses of the divine temple back then were outlandishly beautiful and enchanting, but the youngest 11th goddess was the one that everyone talked most enthusiastically about. Whether in terms of grace or beauty, she was the most outstanding, pristine and unspoiled like an untainted lotus flower, irresistibly captivating with just one look at her. Qing Luoyan's face turned terrifyingly dark. Qing Lan Fei. She has actually returned. The same moment her voice fell, the figure of the woman immediately moved to disappear into the blurry rain in an instant. Qing Lan Fei. Stay right there. Qing Luoyan's eyes shone with a sharp glint, and moved quickly in pursuit. You dare to come back but do not dare to face me? Stop right there. Seeing that she was closing in on the fleeing red figure before her eyes, Qing Luoyan lifted a slender arm, and a sharp sword appeared in her hand with a cold gleam, and she slashed the sword down towards the figure. The red figure dispersed under the cold gleam of the sword, disappearing from sight. Qing Luoyan's face froze, as she stood stunned in her spot. What happened? Where is she? Why? The woman's voice was filled with sorrow, as it slowly rang out from behind. Qing Luoyan turned her head around in a snap, and saw the figure that had disappeared just now standing right behind her, with her head hung low. The woman then slowly raised her head up. Upon the flawlessly beautiful face she saw earlier, starting from a corner at the temple, blood began to flow out through cracked and broken flesh, spreading across her entire face, a grisly and terrifying sight. Elder sis, why did you kill me? Why? Why? The woman that had looked so frail and weak just moments ago had suddenly turned to become a maniacal and ferocious ghost, fangs bared as she roared, pouncing viciously right towards her. Seeing the woman in such a state, it was not known whether Qing Luotan had felt guilty, or she was conscience-stricken. A sliver of fear suddenly rose up in her heart out of the blue. She waved the sword in her hand madly, screaming at the top of her lungs. I did not kill you. Go away. Just get away from me. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Her eyes were closed as the shrill scream tore out from her throat. The body of the monstrous woman who pounced right at her was shredded to pieces in the next instant, falling all over the place to the ground, turning the place to look like a scene right out of hell. Elder sis. I've died. I'm already dead. Those soft words hung in the air as they trailed off, before silence descended back onto the place. Slowly, the rain came to a stop, and light was beginning to lift the darkness of night. From night to day, the speed it happened was incredibly quick. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.